clock is ticking, which means it is time for the College Football Power Hour as we look ahead to Week 3 and wrap a little bow on what was a wild Week 2 in college football. I am Caroline Fenton. He is Adam Breneman, and that is Jason Fitz. And before we take a look ahead to Week 3, because we'll give you our binge stream and skip the games that we are looking at and maybe don't really worry about in Week 3, I want to touch on something that we didn't get a chance to touch on Saturday night. Just a reminder, you can find us here in the College Football Power Hour every midweek, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and an immediate Saturday night reaction after all of the action of the day. But something that we didn't get to touch on in Week 2 on our Saturday reaction was Alabama's game against USF. Now, if you didn't catch that game and you just saw the box score, you saw Alabama take down USF 42-16. You'd say, okay, well, that was just another, joyless murder ball from Alabama. Alabama was doing Alabama things. But if you watch that game, you would realize that final score is not indicative of how that game went at all. It came down to the wire through 3 quarters, and Alabama just happened to score on every single possession of the 4th quarter and really ran away with it late. But Adam and Fitz, we went into this season, we had so many questions about what this Alabama team is. What is life after Nick Saban? What does this Kalen Deboer brand of Alabama football look like? Through 2 weeks and through 3 quarters against USF that Alabama didn't look so great. Frankly, Adam, I don't think I know what Alabama is quite yet.
I think Alabama is still the team I thought they were when the season started. And we were on here first couple shows, and I was talking about I think Alabama will make a run at the SEC championship. I believe in Alabama. I believe in Kalen Deboer. I'll say I was shocked at how Alabama struggled in that game through the first 3 quarters. But in the 4th quarter, they looked like the Alabama program that we expect them to look like. 21 unanswered points in the final 5 minutes of that game. But the challenges to me really came down to Alabama had their left tackle and right tackle out for the game. So their O-line did not play well. And it shows you how thin they are at offensive line. They got manhandled by USF in the first couple quarters. We saw penalties, mistakes by Alabama, things that you're not used to seeing. But if Alabama can stay healthy this season, I believe they'll make a run at this thing and be exactly the team that I thought they'd be in the beginning of the year. The other part of this is anytime you have a new coach, the first moment that your team faces some adversity is really a telling moment for how the season is going to go and what kind of program you're going to be under that new coach. I remember playing for some new coaches myself, and it's easy when everything's going well. Everyone loves the new coach. The culture is great. Everyone loves each other. But the moment that things don't go well, how does everyone respond, and how do they respond when they look at their head coach? For the last long time at Alabama, when things didn't go well, every single player on that sideline looked at Nick Saban, and it felt pretty good. Oh, we're going to be okay. We got Nick Saban, the GOAT. Now you look at the sideline and you're looking at Kalen Deboer and new coaches, and they don't know the coaches that well. And the fact that they responded the way they did and turned it on and didn't just find a way to win the game, absolutely took control in the 4th quarter and dominated it, makes me feel good about Kalen Deboer, how the players feel about him. Because it's easy in those moments to start pointing fingers and saying, well, guess we're not going to be good anymore. Nick Saban's gone. I think those players rallied together, and Alabama is still Alabama. I think Alabama will be a playoff contender, make a run at the SEC championship. And I still believe in this team. To me, also the other true story of this is let's give credit to South Florida and the program they are and what Alex Golesh has built. I mean, I think Alex Golesh we'll be talking about Alex Golesh, USF head coach, because he'll have one of the biggest jobs in college football next year or the year after, and he'll be taking a big time program to play Alabama in the playoff at some point. I mean, check out the Florida job possibly for Alex Golesh, but credit to them. They gave Alabama a run for their money, but they were still the Alabama team that I expected them to be.
So the funny thing is, you and I are going to say almost the exact same thing with a much different meaning. Because as you know, I thought coming into this looked to me more like an Alabama team that will take a little bit of a step back. There'll be an adjustment. It's a 3 or 4 loss team to me. Everything I saw speaks to why I feel the way I feel about Alabama. Because what you just mentioned, yeah, they're missing some offensive linemen, but let's be real. We're used to just a massive amount of depth in Alabama. And I watched that back and I thought, man, this shows you that the depth isn't quite where it was for a long time for Alabama, which is okay. It's just a transition period. And you watch that offense for the first 3 quarters and you think, man, they don't really have a grasp of what they're trying to execute yet, which is okay because it's a transition period. Like, I hear you on saying it didn't change your expectation for Alabama. It just also didn't change my expectation for kind of an up and down rough season, because I think Kalen Deboer's offense is going to take a minute. I don't think they've got a good grasp on it yet. He had a benefit of guys that were executing that offense that played a lot of college football at Washington. They were able to get it figured out quickly with a quarterback that was really familiar with this system. Jalen Milroe is not that. So the whole thing just felt a little off kilter to me, which again, that doesn't mean the sky's falling. That's kind of what I expected for Alabama. So I hear you, it didn't change your expectations. Didn't change mine either. I can't watch that Alabama team and think that it is anywhere near competitive with what we've seen from teams like Texas so far. And that's a different version of Alabama. If you're not competitive with the best of the best in the SEC, that's not the same Alabama.
And I think there's a fair argument to make that throughout this season, Alabama can become that team that can be competitive with the Georgias and the Texases and the Ohio States of the world. I mean, Adam, you know better than anyone, when you have a coaching change, you're going to have hiccups. You're going to have bumps along the road when you're still learning what your team is and what the culture is. But here's the thing that would cause concern for me if I was an Alabama fan. In the fourth quarter, a few minutes into the fourth quarter, Alabama made a change at right tackle. The offensive line, as you alluded to, Adam, it was brutal. Penalties, they got beat on several snaps. They made a change at right tackle, and that's really when things started to shift. I mean, the offense started going off without a hitch once they made that change. Did that momentum happen because they made a change at right tackle? Or did that momentum change because they just out-physicaled, out-toughed, and just, outmanned South Florida late in the game, in the fourth quarter? At that point, was that defensive line or that South Florida defense just gassed? What happens when Alabama plays a team that they're not going to out-physical, that they're not going to out-tough, that they're not going to out-condition? They play Georgia in just a few weeks. You're not going to out-tough that Georgia defensive line. So that's when I think we are really going to get an answer for if this offensive line really can improve to an extent where Alabama can be competitive with some of the richest of the rich in college football. Because what we saw on Saturday against South Florida was concerning, because against South Florida, you should be absolutely mauling these guys. Alabama should have a roster full of guys that can, position 1A, B, C, and D be able to go one-on-one with a South Florida player and win those battles handedly.
When it comes to the coaching change part, Caroline, that you just mentioned, I think that it takes time to truly understand what expectations are, how you're going to operate as a system. I mean, you look at just Nick Sheridan, their offensive coordinator at Alabama. Like, for him to have that the connection with Jalen Milroe and to understand what's going to happen on a week by week basis. 1 week is not enough to get through that, especially the kind of teams that these teams are playing in week one. That you kind of need to go through some stuff to understand completely how you're going to operate as an offense on game day. And I think we've seen Alabama now go through that. And Fitz, to what you said, I think I'm with you. I think we're still back to the same thing we said in the beginning of the season, is that I think Alabama is going to be a great team and have a chance to win the SEC. I think you don't think they are. And this is my take on these early games is I don't put too much stock in them. So I still feel the same way I feel about Alabama. And the reason that it's not alarming me is because they found a way at the end of that game to absolutely dominate every part of the game. It wasn't close. Yes, it was close for the first few quarters, but it wasn't close in the final score because they turned it on in the last 6, 7, 8 minutes of that game and scored on some explosive plays, 21 unanswered. That's the reason I said, okay, that's the Alabama that can win the SEC. Yes, a lot of pieces have to fall into place, but I still see the path to how it happens, and I know it takes time when you have a new coach, and I know for a fact it's proof is in the pudding that Kalen Deboer wins football games, players want to play for him, and he builds cultures. And Alabama is still Alabama. Kalen Deboer is going to get the job done.
I don't disagree.
Take a shot, by the way,
with the fact that they're going to be able to get.
Did I say culture?
Yeah.
Did I say culture?
You did.
Let's go.
Come on.
Everyone take a sip.
I don't disagree that Alabama's going to get better. But let me just, I feel like I'm putting on my anti-Alabama hat, and it's not that at all, y'all. Because I really don't care who wins or loses in college football. I just want chaos. But to me, the concept that Alabama gets better is fine. Do I not also believe that Texas is going to continue to get better week in and week out? Do I not believe that Georgia, who, by the way, is replacing some guys that are playing in the league now, doesn't look like they have any issue with it? Like, Georgia's going to keep getting better. Tennessee's going to keep getting better. Ohio State's going to keep getting better. Like, everybody's going to keep getting better. So I understand that there's going to be this moment where it clicks and all of a sudden they take a big step forward. I just wonder if that step forward is going to be enough in this year's environment of the college football playoff.
Very interesting, Fitz, that you put Tennessee in the same conversation as Georgia and Texas and Ohio
Tennessee's
State.
look great. I know it's only 2 games, but my God, like, this team is just, to me, the most impressive thing about Tennessee is that they're playing with the same level of speed and chaos on the defensive side of the ball as they are in the offensive, right? Like, they're explosive. And I know everybody's going to say, we said the same thing a few years ago. I don't care. Like, this version of this Tennessee team just looks absolutely dynamic. So until they prove otherwise, I think they belong in this conversation.
And to be fair, we were not saying that a few years ago. In 2022, when Tennessee had the number 1 offense in the country, when they were the number 1 team in the country at one point in that 2022 season, we were not saying that the defense was matching what the offense's caliber. The defense was really holding the offense back. It just didn't matter because the offense could score 75 points a game, so it didn't matter if they gave up 60 points a game. I'm with you that I think Tennessee looks like a more complete team this year than Josh Heupel has ever had in Knoxville. I do want to get in to Tennessee because they've got a big matchup against Oklahoma in a couple of weeks. Not a huge test for them this week against Kent State. But as we put a bow on week 2, I do want to look ahead to week 3. Now, our very, very creative colleague here on the College Football Power Hour, Jason Fitz, came up with a new segment idea called Name, Image, and Liked It. A little play on words on NIL. Name is a guy that we are all looking at. It is good.
That's good stuff.
Now you know what I really do when I'm like when I'm at
Jason.
the gym. Like, so when I'm working out, like everybody else focuses on things. No, I'm listening to random college football podcasts. I'm listening to stuff, and I'm like, that's a good idea. So like, you guys helped distract me in the middle of sets that I wasn't capable of.
Fitz, how long did you have this in your mind until you decided it's time to present it as an idea to the show? Was this like a today idea? Have you had it for a few weeks?
45 seconds, maybe. Like, see, once, it came into my mind. I was literally in between sets. I set down the massive weights that I'm lifting. They aren't massive. I set them down, and I'm like, that's a good idea. I'm gonna text that right now because, like, look, I'm gonna forget if I don't text it to you right then. So yeah, it went straight out. But you guys embraced it. Let's go.
And I love it. And let me just say, I love how the podcast has just turned into, applause for Jason Fitz. On Saturday, Fitz gave himself the love for all of his picks getting right. We're giving Fitz a round of applause today for his ideas.
I mean, damn, if I'm going to keep being right like this, then we're just going to keep praising it. Like, look, I'll eat crow when I'm wrong. It just hasn't happened yet.
You deserve it. But name, image, and liked it. So a name that we are looking for this week, a guy that maybe could have a breakout game on the horizon, a guy that we are keeping an eye on. Image is an image that we really will not forget, something that was really pivotal, something that was really impactful from the week before, and liked it. Just something that we liked on the field, off the field, on social media, at a post-game press conference, just something that we liked from the week before. So, Fitzy, I will start with you, the brainchild of this idea, your name, image, and what you liked.
I mean, if we're going to go for a name to watch for, especially going into this week, I think we all know that the premier matchup we'll be talking about is Alabama-Wisconsin. And I keep looking at Melosi, the running back out of Wisconsin, and the way he's run the first couple of weeks and think, man, this is going to be the test, right? Like, we all know Wisconsin runs the ball. We all know that Luke Fickell is going to come in there and do some different things over time. But right now, today, the way that they beat Alabama, in my mind, is they got to out-physical them in Camp Randall. And Adam, that's easier said than done. If you're going to do it, your running back's going to have a huge game. So the name to watch for is really because if he blows up, then Alabama's season goes off the rails this weekend. If he doesn't blow up, then Alabama shows people like me that maybe we need to calm down on the Alabama's not going to be ready to talk. Like, I think he becomes the pivotal part of this.
Yeah, and we know the formula for how Wisconsin wins that game. Like, they're going to have to run the football, as you just said, be great on first and second down, put themselves on third down and short, and then throw the ball when Alabama's not expecting it, right? You don't want to be in third down and long situations against Alabama when you're a Wisconsin offense, and the way you do it is you feed Melosi about 30 carries a game. There's an old rule that one of my coaches at football said, and he would say, if you run the ball 40 times in a game, you normally win that game. Like if you can find a way to run the ball 40 times, because if you're running 40 times, you're probably up. So the 40 carry rule, like run the ball 40 times if you're Wisconsin. Find a way to run the football that much, and obviously Melosi's going to be getting a ton of those carries, and he's going to have a massive day. And you talk about a guy who was pretty highly recruited and has had a lot of excitement around that program. I think he's due for a big day against an Alabama defense that showed to be a little bit, have some weaknesses and have some cracks.
Now, also, Caroline, how cool? Just before you comment on this real quick, how stinking cool is it that Alabama, Wisconsin is just a regular season? I'm sorry, I can't get used to it. Every time I think about we got Alabama at Camp Randall. I just love every ounce of this.
We've been treated to so many good non-conference games just through the first 3 weeks of this college football season. Like Alabama, Wisconsin feels like it just feels like a playoff game. Texas, Michigan this past week, that is a playoff matchup. Clemson, Georgia that we got at the beginning of the season. We just get so many chef's kiss kind of matchups. I don't need cupcakes anymore. Not in this new college football. No more butt crack state universities, okay? We want Alabama, Wisconsin in week 3.
If we don't get t-shirts made that say butt crack state university, what are we doing? Good. I'm in on that one.
Woo! BCSU. Not quite sure what their mascot is. Maybe we can workshop that one.
Fits his face.
I have no comment. We will just keep going.
Just saying, if you're watching on YouTube, just watch Fitz's facial expressions throughout the episode. They're the best. They're so good.
Golden. Fitzy, what's your image from last week that really sticks out to you?
I think the image, let's face it, I went to bed. I wanted to go to bed after we did our show. Let's give everybody a real peek behind the curtain here, right? We tape very late on Saturday night. So I've been watching, and I do an early morning Fox Sports radio show that morning. So I've been up since roughly 4 a.m. watching college football all day, right? So I'm feeling good. We finished the show. I climb into bed. I turn on the Oregon game, and I think, well, watch a little bit of this blowout, and then I'll fall asleep. No, keeping me up until whatever, 3. It was a 23-hour day because I had to watch this thing. And that kick going in at the very end made me angry because I had to stay up so late, made me angry because I picked Oregon to be the national champions this year, and it made me angry because, yet again, I feel like Oregon's just waltzing out there like they don't give a damn, and I'm waiting for them to actually wake up and play Oregon football. It's gross to me. I won't forget the image because I sat there and thought, my God, are we going to send out a bat signal at 3 in the morning Eastern time and be like, got to do a quick emergency pod? I can't forget that one.
I had the same exact experience, Fitz, of getting in bed and then being like, wait, I have to watch this Oregon game now. It's a close game. Didn't expect it to be. I was ready, and I ended up staying up till 2 a.m. as well. But it's East Coast college football. You got to be ready for some long days, man. And we film our pod late because we love ball that much, and we at least saw a good game. And Boise State's pretty good, and we'll talk about Oregon in a little bit, but tough luck 2 weeks in a row for them. But at least it gave us something to watch at about 1 a.m. East Coast time.
That in Arizona State, Mississippi State. And if you're staying up late, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, like I was, it was awesome. We were treated to some, after the Pac-12 disintegrated, I thought, what am I going to do with myself without Pac-12 after dark? What am I going to do when I can't wake up on the couch at 3 o'clock in the morning and the TV is blaring and I'm wondering what year it is and Arizona is losing to, Oregon by 2 touchdowns, but we still get treated as even better late night football post Pac-12 after dark.
We also had USC on, I think, at 10 o'clock at night. It was the USC on the Big Ten after dark, now they're calling it. So, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just new
conference. 52-0 routing or whatever it was. Yeah. I didn't catch that one. The L of your NIL, Fitzy. What'd you like last week?
I went back and rewatched Quinn Ewers in that Texas game because I wanted to see if maybe I was too prisoner of the moment. I'm telling you, the evolution of Quinn Ewers. So then I went on YouTube and I just picked a couple of random games from last year and watched. He looks like a different human being right now. And this is just everything about his confidence and swagger, the stuff we talked about Saturday night, but just his mechanics throwing the football at him, like, it blew my mind. I have become I think if there's a street team and like a mascot head for Quinn Ewers, I've become that guy. Like, watching who Quinn is today and understanding who he was last year, 2 years ago, the evolution of Quinn Ewers might be one of the coolest early season storylines in college football.
It is a remarkable coaching job by Steve Sarkisian and how he's built Quinn Ewers' confidence and how he just seems to believe in himself more and more every time he throws the football. And I did the same thing. I went back and watched some of those watch his what PFF grades, like the big time throws from that game. And there were a few of them that, I mean, I talked about a little bit, like the different arm slots that he's throwing from and the arm angles and how his feet, when he's on the move, don't have to be set to throw across his body. He's making throws that 0.0001% of quarterbacks can make. And the fact that on top of it, he's accurate with the football when he's doing it. I thought one of the most impressive things were a couple plays where he was throwing from an off-platform position, from a varied arm slot due to the defender in his face, and throwing an accurate football that allowed his receiver to run after the catch. So that's like the true test of accuracy, is how is it a ball that your receiver doesn't have to break stride? Can they run after the catch? There were like 2 or 3 of them in wild body positions when he threw the ball. That's the kind of quarterback that it takes to not just be a game manager, but to actually create when things aren't always going well. And Quinn has it completely. I mean, I said it to you guys before. I think he's made the case that he's the best quarterback in the country, and right now he's my Heisman favorite.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to start shopping on NFL.com for a Raiders jersey that says Ewers on the back. Let's go.
I love it.
I've heard a lot of discussion after that game of, maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks down the line, that Michigan win won't really look as impressive because maybe Michigan gets more exposed than they already have been as a team that's truly going through a rebuild. And do I think that's possible? Like, for sure. Yes, absolutely. But it's not even just the weight or the magnitude of the win, because going into the big house and winning is not something that I think can be undermined. But it was the throws that he made. It was the decisiveness. It was how he knew exactly what he wanted to do and where he wanted to go and where the checkdowns may have been. It was, I think you said the right word. It was the confidence that maybe we hadn't seen over the last 2 years of Quinn Ewers, maybe the Quinn Ewers experience over the last 2 seasons. There was just a little bit something missing, whether it was, confidence in the playbook, comfort with the players around him, whatever it might have been. But I saw a quarterback that was so sure of himself and trusted his receivers, which was another big thing for me with new faces that he's throwing to this season.
Yeah, 100%. I'll give you guys my name to watch for, and I'm going to keep on your running back train here, Fitz. I'm going Kyle Monangai, running back at Rutgers.
Ooh, Rutgers love on the pod.
I called the game, so I saw it up close and personal. I interviewed him at Big Ten Media Day. I mean, I get Kyle Monangai on all your Heisman watch lists. I know he's had odds for a while, but they're going to keep going up. Kyle Monangai in that game had 27 carries, averaged 7.5 yards a pop every time he touched the football, 208 yards, had a few touchdowns. He's now got almost 400 yards through 2 games. You look at Rutgers' schedule, no Ohio State, no Michigan, no Penn State. They play Virginia Tech in 2 weeks with a bye right now. Rutgers is in a position to make a great run at this thing, and Kyle Monangai is their best player. And I think in that conference, the kind of stage they're going to be on in some of their games, Monangai's got a chance to be the best running back in college football. I think he is. He could have left for the NFL last year, but he decided to stay. And he's running like a dude who has a chip on his shoulder and trying to prove something that he's the best running back in the country. Watching him in person calling that game was so impressive with his contact balance, how he got more physical as the game went on, which is wild. I mean, there was a time he popped off like a 60-yard run, had to be gassed, and then stayed in the game and carried the ball 3 times in a row on the goal line to pound it into the end zone with even more physicality than he had all game. The dude's impressive, and he's got every athletic trait you'd want and has great vision. I love him as a player, and it was cool kind of knowing him a little bit from Big Ten Media Day and now seeing him perform at a high level. And the schedule plays out well for Rutgers to make a run at this thing.
I want to live in a world where Breneman's schedule takes are so perfect, because they are. I want to live in a world where like Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, they just all eliminate each other by playing each other. And somehow we end up with the first ever Big Ten championship game in the playoff era that's Nebraska versus Rutgers. Injected in my veins.
So good.
Let's
Just
go.
how God
good.
intended it to be.
Matt Rule, Greg Schiano, Big Ten championship.
Oh, man. Knowing that like
so
all these SEC fans and all these other teams are just going to be sitting there saying, wait, who's making the college football? Okay. All right. Let's go.
Rutgers?
Pop off, Queen.
Rutgers?
I will say that if you are not a Rutgers fan, or if you are not professionally obligated to know the Rutgers roster and to watch Rutgers games, I don't think that you would be calling for a Rutgers running back to be in the Heisman contention. But that's why we love your expertise here on the pod, Adam, because frankly,
Let's go.
I'm a sicko.
I haven't watched any Rutgers film.
Hold on, but Caroline, you don't. I mean, there's some like subtle Rutgers slander there. I mean, Rutgers is the big time program now. I mean,
come on.
I mean,
that's good football. Are you kidding me?
I don't know about
that's good ball.
Rutgers big time. Okay, I will ask you this question. Let's just say in the next 5 years, whenever college football inevitably breaks off into 2 power conferences, is Rutgers in one of them?
Well, you make a fair point.
Rutgers is a bridge.
Conferences?
Like Rutgers is the hot girl you date for a minute, but you're not going to marry her. Like even Schiano. If Schiano turns around and makes the college football playoff, he's immediately going to dump Rutgers for something hotter. Like there's no way about it. He's just going to be like, this was cute, this was fun, I got this out of my system. Now I'm going to go to a real. I'm just saying.
Think about what Schiano did at Rutgers his first tenure there. I mean, pandemonium in Piscataway. I mean, they were a top team in the country. I'm not saying they'll get there, but Rutgers could be an 8, 9, 10 win team this season.
We're going to have a college football
Rutgers
intervention for
could be an 8
Breneman.
win team this season. That's how you're selling the team.
I guarantee. Look, you don't even have to listen to this show anymore for good. Like you just want to listen to this show to figure out what absolute chaos is going to come out of our mouths. Because so far, week in and week out, we are delivering with the wildest takes. But so far, it's been pretty accurate.
I think we're going to look back on this and Rutgers is going to be they'll be sitting at 8, 9, 10 wins at the end of the season. Now, I don't know what it means for where they are in the Big Ten, but they're going to win a lot of games.
Somebody from social just clip it. Rutgers, better season than Alabama. Book it.
The people are talking. Rutgers to the 12-team playoff.
They are.
Rutgers is the Cinderella story of the season. I'll buy it. Hey, I'm here for it. It's week 3. Anything could happen. What is your image that's sticking out to you this week, Adam?
Yeah, I got Northern Illinois coach Thomas Hammock in his post-game speech, and it was emotional. It was passionate. Post-game interview, I should say. Everything that you think about when you think about college football. My favorite thing he said about on the interview is said something along the lines of, I told our guys, I don't need you to be perfect, but I need you to be at your very best. And if we're at our very best, we'll have a chance to beat these guys. And anything but your best, we'll lose. And I think that was a powerful thing. And it kind of reminded me that these, for Notre Dame and for NIU, like, despite all the professionalization of the sport and despite NIL in the portal, these are still kids. These are still 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. Anything can happen on any day. And if a team shows up and gives their best and one team doesn't, anything can happen. And I just thought that was a really cool moment. And you also see the passion behind what this win meant for Thomas Hammock, for this program, for his players. And just as all the talk is negative about Notre Dame, but think about all the positive memories. Like, that is something those kids will remember for the rest of their lives and be talking about when they're 60 years old with their grandkids. I thought it was a really cool moment. And also, alumni coaches that go back and play and coach at their alumni school. Thomas Hammock played at NIU. Like, it just means more. And that formula works. We've seen it at a bunch of programs around the country. And in that interview, you could tell that was a coach who loves his players, who cares deeply about that school. I thought it was a really cool moment for college football.
I also think it's a beautiful, like, y'all know I spend a lot of time on my social media talking about therapy and mental health and all these things that I think are important. And one of my journeys in life has been to get more of the men in my life to be open with emotion and conversation with each other about the good and the bad and the ugly. It's been really transformative for me in my life and for a lot of my friends. I watched that and thought, these are the moments that are really beautiful, because we think so much about coaches and yelling and coaches and screaming and even coaches enjoy, but like to see raw, real emotion from a coach in that moment shows you how much they love the game, how much they love these kids, how much love they have for each other. It's just so real, and I think it's powerful for everybody to see that somebody that just had this incredible moment can break down in a very real, raw way, and it can be impactful for that. I think it's beautiful, and it keeps an important conversation going about the true emotion that football players and coaches and everybody around the game have to feel and have to process every week, that it could get more time and more focus from everybody. So I loved every ounce of it.
So well said. And I think it was just such a cool moment and a special moment that gave me chills watching in real time, gives me chills right now just talking about it. And I think through all of the changes of college football now that money has been involved in it, and NIL and the transfer portal, there's been so many conversations about college football losing what makes it special. It's the love of the game. It's for the love of the name on the front of your jersey, for your brothers in the locker room playing for the same team that your dad played for on a campus that you loved, that maybe that has lost its luster a little bit in the professionalization of college football. That was such a great and humbling reminder that there are still players and coaches and programs that go out and do this simply for the love of the game. So perfect example. That was such a cool and special moment this past week. What else did you like, Adam? What's your L in NIL?
My L and NIL thing I liked was the Cade Klubnik bounce back week. We talked a lot after week one about Clemson getting destroyed in the second half by Georgia and how bad Clemson's offense looked. I was certainly a culprit in that, of just of trashing Clemson after that week. But then to come back in week two and face an App State team who's a really good team and a good program as only a 17, I think they were 17, 18 point favorite, and to score 56 points in the first half after what happened in week one, Cade Klubnik with nearly 400 yards passing through just two incompletions in that entire game. 5 touchdowns for Cade Klubnik. I thought it was really cool just to see a guy who's had a lot of adversity now in his time at Clemson with really high expectations. You could start to hear the chatter of, is Cade Klubnik the future? At what point are we going to start looking around at Clemson? What's going on? Is Dabo going to be around? To kind of bounce back like that and have that kind of game gives a lot of confidence to your team, gives confidence to Cade Klubnik that, quite frankly, he needs. And now Clemson, I mean, guys, we've talked about it a lot. The overreaction, underreaction, is the sky falling? And we talked about Clemson, and I said the sky's falling at Clemson. But you look at the college football playoff era now with the 12-team playoff, and you look at Clemson's schedule. Here's my schedule takes again. There's a lot of things here that could line up where Clemson could be, 4-1, 5-1 pretty soon and be right back in the mix in this thing. And if they have a quarterback that plays well, that's what it relies on. It relies on Cade Klubnik playing well, and we saw a really good quarterback on Saturday.
I think it's interesting because they have this weekend off and then they get NC State, right? Like, I think that NC State game becomes really interesting. It will teach us if Clemson has actually righted this thing, if Klubnik's got a little momentum. It'll also teach us if they go in and just crush NC State. I think that will change a little bit of how we saw the big Tennessee win over. So, it's amazing how this, if this, then that happens from some of these games. But I'm with you. Anytime, I think Klubnik, it was important to go into this bye week, this opportunity with a little bit of momentum in Carolina. He has that now.
And, Adam, you bring up the question or the point that, a lot of people have been questioning if Cade Klubnik is the guy. I still have that question. And yes, a great game and gaudy score and gaudy numbers against App State. Sure, that absolutely rights the ship a little bit after they tucked their tail between their legs after a butt whooping over Georgia. But I still have that question because that's great that Cade Klubnik can look good against App State. That's great that Clemson can blow App State out. But if we're going to talk about Clemson as some of the big dogs as a potential college football playoff contender, well, I need you to do more against a team that is a true college football playoff contender in Georgia. If you can beat the bad teams, okay, and I don't want to say bad team, App State's not a bad team, but if you can outclass a team that you should outclass, good. You're doing the things that you should be doing. But if you get outclassed by a team that a lot of people think that you belong in the conversation with, well, then you don't belong in that conversation. So you beat the team that you should beat. Now, what do you look like moving forward? Does that game give Cade Klubnik and this Clemson offense a little bit more momentum and a little bit more confidence? We'll see that against NC State. Yeah,
I'm with you 100%. I think more than anything, as as a guy who loves college football and a guy who loves these stories of these quarterbacks that kind of overcome some stuff, I think I was happy to see Cade Klubnik not fold. But like you said, he's got to do it against a big-time opponent. And to Fitz's point, what you do before a bye week is really, really important for everything around the program, for confidence. There is the worst feeling I've ever had in football is going into a bye week when you lost and you didn't play well, personally. Nothing worse, because the whole bye week, you're thinking about it. Coaches are thinking about how you didn't play well. And when you go in with a win and you go in and you played well, you just have a little bit more swagger, a little more confidence. Everyone's feeling pretty good during that bye week. So for Clemson, I thought that performance was really big.
Real quick, dude, I'll say this. Like, what do I know about playing football, right? I'm a 5'9", 155-pound fiddle player. But I will tell you this. When we would have breaks on the road, if I played like trash on our last show, it ruined me for the entire break. Because all you do, like, you got 2 weeks, like, you have a bad show and you get back on stage the next night, you can get out of your system. If it sits there for 2 weeks while you're just thinking about that bad show, it then made the first show back tight every single time. And I knew it. Like, I was smart enough to know that I was going to be tight. I can't imagine for everybody, if you're in that situation and it's bad, it's terrible. But if you're in that situation, you walk away and you play really well, then all of a sudden it gives you just a little bit more pep in your step when you come back.
Yeah, no doubt. And we know all these, you know Fitz as a professional musician, and we know all these guys, these quarterbacks, and these big-time players at big-time programs. They're all perfectionists. Every single one of them. You know that Georgia game really, kind of lingered with Cade Klubnik. As far as my NIL, is anyone familiar with the name Colin Guggenheim?
Because the Guggenheim Museum?
You'd think.
Okay.
It was a name that I'd never even heard of before until he ran for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns against LSU last week. Colin Guggenheim is the running back at Nicholls State University. $500 to anybody who knows where Nicholls State is. So that is why my name, it's in Thibodaux, Louisiana. My name of this week is Rocket Sanders. South Carolina hosts LSU this week. Rocket Sanders, running back at South Carolina, transferred in from Arkansas. He was dealing with injuries last year, but 2 years ago in 2022, he ran for almost 1,500 yards. We saw South Carolina look pretty darn good offensively and specifically defensively last week against Kentucky. And we saw LSU last week. A defense that's in transition, a defense that lost 2 starting defensive tackles to the NFL this past season, and another defensive tackle to an Achilles injury this past week. This is a defense that has struggled and has struggled famously this season and last season as well. It's a really vulnerable defensive front and a veteran running back that has yet to break out, and a veteran running back at a team that is going to be hosting College Game Day. Williams-Brice Stadium is an underratedly intimidating environment. I think that this is a Rocket Sanders breakout game in a South Carolina uniform loading.
I love that, by the way. I love that all three of us went running backs, Breneman. Like, look at this. Yeah. We're like football in the 90s here. We're all going running backs.
And running backs? Who are we?
I thought Guggenheim was going to be our player to watch. I thought that was going to be your guy to watch, which would have been
Go back and watch him.
Yeah.
Go back and watch him last week, because it was a 67-yard touchdown run. Like, every single time he touched the ball, he did something outstanding. And I'm thinking, who is this Guggenheim kid? Where is his NIL deal? Because he deserves one after that performance. My goodness.
I remember real quick on the Rocket Sanders. I remember recruiting Rocket Sanders when I was coaching at Arizona State. He went to Arkansas out of school and was a big time recruit. So it's good to see, again, another guy that transferred, had an injury last year and came off of that, and I think has a chance now to kind of live up to that expectation that everyone in the country has had for him since he was in the class of 2021 in high school, in a big time environment with College Game Day in town. It's going to be fun to watch.
And a big environment for South Carolina. Like, South Carolina, the program right now, new environment in college football. South Carolina can kind of tell everybody where they belong in the SEC. I love that. I love that call. Who do you have as an image that you won't forget?
Shedeur Sanders walking off the field with 2 minutes left on the clock. And it was really Shedeur Sanders and his look of frustration, his look of just throwing up his hands like, what do you expect me to do, for nearly that entire game in Nebraska? Because that's the whole time I felt like he looked defeated. He looked frustrated. He looked like he didn't have the answers that you would want your starting quarterback to have. Like, that is really what stuck out to me, because We know how much confidence and swagger this Colorado team has and had throughout the entire offseason. It stands out to me, Shador talking about how every team that they play is their Super Bowl. Like, that is a certain level of cockiness that I think that you want a player to have. It's not a negative thing. But that, I think, was the first time that we could all visibly see on Shador Sanders' face the look of, I can't do this by myself. Almost like a sense of helplessness because he wasn't getting any protection. The play calling is not creative in the slightest. Colorado doesn't even attempt to run the football. We all know that football is a 22-person game. It's not a 2-person game. It's not a Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter show. They can beat North Dakota State single-handedly. They can't beat the Nebraskas and the rest of the Big 12s of the world. So that game, the feeling of defeat that it looked like Shador Sanders had all game long was what really stuck out to me, Adam.
Shador's in a tough spot, and his offense has given him no help. The offensive line is terrible. It's the same Colorado that we saw last year. Like, nothing's different. They look the exact same. But specifically for Shador Sanders, if I'm in his inner circle, I'm advising Shador Sanders that this is really no longer about your frustrations with your offensive line. This is everything you're doing now. NFL GMs are watching every single thing. And the way he walked off that field, the way that in his post-game press conference, he said something along the lines of kind of throwing his offensive line under the bus. I think He said something like, how many times did Dylan Raiola get touched today? I think he said a comment like that. I understand the frustration. Shador Sanders is going to have a case to be one of the top 2-3 quarterbacks picked, maybe number 1 in the NFL draft. But now, almost in a selfish way, it needs to be like, man, just get through this season and go become a top 10 NFL draft pick. And everything you're doing, these coaches, scouts, evaluators, general managers, administrators, everyone in NFL front offices, owners are going to be watching and saying, is he a guy who can lead our team to victory? And is he a guy when things don't go well that everyone will rally around and can get through some bad stuff? And when I watched that game, and I watched, to your point, the image of him walking off the field, I don't look at that and say, that's a guy who can withstand adversity in the NFL and go through a bad season and still be the face of a franchise. I hope that changes. He's got all the talent. But for me, that's the key for Shador Sanders now, because Colorado's not going to have the season that he wanted them to have when the year started.
Well, and it's important to know, I've talked to former GMs. I've talked to people around the league, and they'll all say the same thing. The reason this is important as part of his evaluation is more likely than not, if he gets drafted where he wants to, he's going to go somewhere that's going to lose football games. So that's why it becomes an important part of the context and how you evaluate these quarterbacks, because the first year or two, they're going to lose so many games. You got to know he's not going to lose the locker room. He's not going to lose himself. He's not going to lose his confidence. You got to see all of that at the college level. And so this isn't Caleb coming in and it's like, well, all I did was win. This is a kid that right now is going through a really tough spot where he's losing games, and he probably feels like he should get more credit for what they're trying to do. But you just can't show that because the league's watching, and wherever he goes is going to have to evaluate, can he be better at that at the pros? I agree with you guys. It's an important part of what has to happen for him right now in his evolution.
And we can't overstate how much the little things mean the world to NFL general managers. When your life and your career and your livelihood is on the line, every single itty-bitty, teeny little thing matters. Like, you might say, well, it was just a comment that Shador made in the post-game press conference. No, this is the most important job interview of his entire life, is the entirety of this next year. Like, I always go back to an example of a scout for an NFL team was interviewing one of the top quarterback candidates in a couple years ago in the draft. That quarterback candidate walked out of the meeting room and grabbed a bag of chips without asking. And that instantly set that scout off. He's like, nope, that's not our guy. That is not our guy, because he wasn't respectful of the chips in the meeting room. Like, it might sound silly and trivial, but that's how much the little things matter to a lot of these NFL general managers and front offices.
It's important, though, Caroline, because like one former GM told me, when I draft a quarterback, what I'm really saying is that I'm willing to bank that I will be able to feed my family based on the performance of this young man. And when you put it that way, that's what we're talking about. We're not just talking about evaluation. It's like my job. I'm going to lose my job if I get this pick right. So I'm going to or if I get this pick wrong. I'm going to lose my job if I get this pick wrong, which means I'm going to overanalyze absolutely everything this person does, because my kids depend on him. My wife depends on him. Everybody in my family depends on him. And when you put that weight behind it, I think it gives us more understanding why the league's so critical of players when they're coming in.
Like the movie Draft Day, because it's super realistic. But when he found out that none of the quarterback's teammates went to his birthday party, and that was it was enough for him to not draft him. Like, as unrealistic as that movie is, like that little tidbit, I'm like, I could see that possibly being a factor in some GM's valuations. But one thing that I liked from this past week, is anybody paying attention to how chaotic the Big 12 is? I mean, my goodness, the Big 12 is delivering on exactly what we thought the Big 12 could be. I know Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, said we think that we're the deepest conference in all of college football, and the SECs and the Big Tens of the world got their panties all in a wad that he said that. But I think he's onto something. Like, let Brett Yormark cook, because there's like 10 teams that could win this conference. This past week, we had Iowa State with a last-minute field goal to beat Iowa. We had Illinois beating Kansas when they turned the ball over 4 times. We had Oklahoma State down 2 scores against Arkansas, winning in double overtime. We had Arizona State beating Mississippi State at like 4 o'clock in the morning. Arizona State's quarterback didn't even throw for 70 yards. Like, it is pure and utter madness in the Big 12. And I don't know if it's necessarily good or competitive football, but it is a fun brand of football to watch.
I heard Joel Klatt say early in the season, maybe before the year started, that the Big 12 was the deepest conference in football. And I thought he was crazy when he said it. You mentioned it, Caroline. And I was like, what do you like? But depending on how we define deep, there's a case there. And I think it's definitely the most wide open conference. I mean, there's a case that Kansas State's the best team in the Big 12. There's a case that Iowa State, after beating Iowa, is the best team in the Big 12. There's a case that Arizona State's up there. There's a case that Arizona's got a chance. I mean, you got BYU, Utah. Yeah, I mean, how do I forget Utah? Yeah,
Utah.
Yeah, Utah probably is the best team in the Big 12. So I think it's wide open. It's going to be a chaotic, and it's what I love about conference realignment. It's we got all these West Coast teams now in the Big 12, and it's gonna be a fun season to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The one thing I would say is that of all of those teams we mentioned, the one most likely to be able to make some noise in the college football playoff to me is Utah. So for the Big 12, your best case scenario is you get absolute chaos. Everybody beats up on everybody. It's wild. It's fun. It's exciting. But Utah goes to the college football playoff because they definitely stand like, I don't want to see Iowa's trash offense in the college football playoff. I don't want to see Iowa State's, I should say, trash offense in the college football playoff. I'm still on Iowa. I don't want to see any of that.
Yes, Utah right now looks like the best team in the Big 12, but I mean, Oklahoma State and Kansas State aren't far behind. And I mean, Kansas State quarterback Avery Johnson, I think it's still, even though Utah looks like the favorite to win that conference, it's still in my mind a wide open game. And I think that if Utah played Oklahoma State or Kansas State at a neutral site right now, I think that'd be a pretty evenly favored game. What do you think, Fitz? You think Utah would be heavily favored?
No, I think you're probably right. Especially Kansas State's far more explosive than I want to give them credit for, and that would do well on that. I think Utah's the best balanced on both sides of the ball, but I agree with you. I think they would get a fight from Oklahoma State, from Kansas State for sure. Those three stand out. The most interesting part is by the end of the year, can the Big 12 get a second team in the college football playoff? And I know we're way early to be dissecting that, but as we get later in the season, that's going to be the real question. Do they have a number 2 team?
And even Kansas State just barely squeaked past Tulane this past weekend.
That's crazy.
To add to the
They're
chaos.
too talented. It's too talented. That shouldn't happen. They're too good.
A lot of things that happened this past week shouldn't have happened. Notre Dame should not have lost to Northern Illinois. Penn State should not have trailed Bowling Green at half. LSU should not have given up 150 rushing yards to Colin Guggenheim. Yet here we are. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, let's look ahead to week 3. Stick around. All right, week 3, not the greatest slate out there. I'm going to be honest with everybody, not the juiciest matchups. There's one matchup in particular that I think is going to be the game that everybody is watching, that everybody has recorded. They're turning their phone on, do not disturb. The game that everyone's going to be binging, and that's Alabama at Wisconsin. We touched on it earlier in the pod, but that feels like a postseason matchup that's two, storied traditions and storied teams. It's going to be a fun matchup. And I know that this is going to be a great matchup, but for me, the game that I'm binging is actually Memphis at Florida State. It's the Mike Norvell Bowl. It's Mike Norvell coming off of a bye, 0-2 with two of the most embarrassing performances that we have seen, both in standalone slots, with abysmal and brutal quarterbacking, with a Memphis team that is salivating for the opportunity to go into Tallahassee, upset them yet again, and make their case to be the Group of 5 candidate.
I like it. I like that you called it the Mike Norvell Bowl, especially because if Mike Norvell loses this game to Memphis, it may be the Mike Norvell is out bowl, is what it may be at Florida State. He may be knocking on Memphis's door trying to get another job. So that one's going to be fun to watch. And on top of it, I think we got to throw in the Alabama-Wisconsin game as well as a binge. This just kind of feels like a big game in college football. Both the teams are 2-0. Alabama, obviously a top 5 team. I think, too, you look at Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. When you look back at what Luke Fickell did at Cincinnati, it was kind of year 2 when they had the big, massive turnaround and went 11-2. So it hasn't been pretty yet at Wisconsin for Luke Fickell, but now they got a chance against an Alabama team that we talked about struggled against South Florida. So it's going to be a fun matchup to watch, and we at least got 2 good games on.
I mean, can I split screen those? Because I'm still with you. By the way, Memphis can run the football, and you and I can run the football on Florida State. So Memphis gets a win here. They might have a very clear path to the college football playoff as the highest ranked Group of 5 team. So there's a lot on the line for Memphis in that, but I'm with you. I think if we're all being real, like at the end of the day, if we got one choice on the TV between these two matchups, Alabama, Wisconsin, the fact that the game's in Camp Randall, I want to see what Jalen Milroe looks like in that crowd. There's so much sexiness to that.
It's also Fitz Alabama's first road trip under Kalen Deboer. And we talked a lot about what kind of Alabama team are we getting here, getting to see how a team travels with the new head coach and how do they perform. Do they show up and play flat in the first quarter? Do they struggle like they did against South Florida? Or do they come out against Wisconsin, a tough place to play, and put up a ton of points and come out with kind of a lot of energy and excitement? That's what I'll be watching that early in this game.
I hadn't even thought of this, but every coach has a different plan on how they attack road games. You're totally right. Like exactly. When they travel, how they travel, where they stay, what the routine is, it's totally different. I hadn't even thought about that. It's a great point by you. That really is something to watch in the first quarter of that game.
And another thing to point out, once Alabama gets past Wisconsin, guess who comes to town? The Georgia Bulldogs. So if there's any sort of snafus or offensive line chemistry that needs to be wrinkled out, obviously you'd like to do that against an opponent that's not in a Power 5 conference, or Power 4 conference rather. But this feels like Alabama's last opportunity to get the wrinkles out, to get the offensive line under control, to get the penalties under control before they take on Georgia, because every single eye in America is going to be watching that game in Tuscaloosa in week 4. So those are the marquee games. Those are the games that we're binging. What are the games, the stream games, that we feel like are not going to be in the split screen, but a game that we're absolutely going to catch the highlights on Sunday morning?
I mean, doesn't Oregon and Oregon State have to be this, Breneman? Like as poorly as Oregon's played, and the fact that this is Oregon State, like it's just right now, Oregon State has to look at this salivating at the opportunity to send this entire thing off the rails. Like there's so much drama behind this emotionally that I love it.
It's a huge game for a couple of reasons. For Oregon, the chance to get your season kind of back on track with a big statement win. I mean, I still think Oregon is a top team in the country. I still think they have the talent. I think they're going to be okay throughout this season. But we're going to find out a lot about Dylan Gabriel when he gets to play a rival and see how Oregon performs. For Oregon State, I mean, this is a statement game for Oregon State. Think about the conference realignment implications that this has. Their rival, Oregon, gets taken out of the Pac-12, goes to the Big Ten. Everyone's raving about how great Oregon is as a program. And the little brother, Oregon State, is stuck without a conference. And this is Oregon State's chance to prove they belong in a power conference in college football. They just went on the road and shut out San Diego State. Oregon State still has good players. Their culture is well established because of what Jonathan Smith did there. And they get a chance to play their rival in Oregon. Like this is a put us into a power conference game for Oregon State, and there's a lot on the line for their program. It's kind of a savior type game.
This is Oregon State's job interview. Pick me to be in the Big 12, please. I'd like a conference, please. And yeah, it's the grandeur of a rivalry, an in-state rivalry that we get in week 3. It's that's absolutely on the list. And another one for me that it's not necessarily marquee matchup kind of game, but I think is a really interesting one and potentially has, some chaos involved in it is Tulane at Oklahoma. We just talked about how Tulane was knocking on the door against Kansas State, how Kansas State just narrowly got out of that game unscathed. Well, Tulane's quarterback can sling it, and Oklahoma's secondary has proven to struggle over the past couple of weeks. I mean, they just barely got past Houston. They beat Houston 16-12 this past week. So I think that Oklahoma is a better team. I think that Oklahoma is going to win this game, but I think that this is going to be probably more of a test than Oklahoma maybe initially thought hosting Tulane this weekend.
Yeah, they better make sure they don't look past this game, too. I mean, not for
nothing. This is not a team you can look past.
But they got Tennessee coming next week, right? And so you look at the gauntlet they're about to have. They have to get this game because they have Tennessee at Auburn, Texas. Then a couple of weeks after that, they have Ole Miss. They still have Missouri and Alabama on their schedule. Like Oklahoma's just got a bucket full of losses facing them. They need to go out and actually show that they're playing well coming into this game.
Yeah, and it's a big chance for Tulane head coach John Sumrall, who's on a bunch of short lists to be the next massive name in the coaching carousel. Is like he'll be a head coach at a Power 4 school next year, probably. Chance for him on a huge stage against Oklahoma to have his team play well. The one other game that I'm streaming almost made the binge for me is Missouri Boston College. I think this game
that was on my list too.
Sneaky good one. Boston College with Bill O'Brien at the helm, huge win at Florida State to start the season. They're 2-0. And then they got Missouri, who hasn't allowed a point this season. So I think that'll change this weekend. Boston College is physical. They run the football well. Bill O'Brien's a good coach. Castellanos is a great quarterback they have there who's back for another season. So this could be a ball game into the fourth quarter. I think this one could come down to a final possession type ball game.
Oh, the hype is going to go through the roof if BC gets this win. I'm with you. That's actually a
Boston
really good game.
Yeah, Boston will be fired up.
Quick scheduling note, hat tip to Adam. Why is Missouri playing 2 teams from the state of Massachusetts this season? Like, who scheduled Missouri on the road at UMass?
Somebody that wanted an easy W.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, we'll take your cupcake in the north.
UMass in their last year before they joined a conference was trying to get like $1.2 million or something to pay for the new headset communication.
and they're looking around saying, you know what, let's go up, check out the fall foliage and the leaves dropping, and then just go kick the snot out of somebody. Like, it's easy money for them.
Let's get some apple cider donuts, maybe some lobster bisque. Enjoy our trip.
I wish UMass would schedule some FCS opponents or something to get some wins after losing to Eastern Michigan, and I don't know who they lost to last week, but I'm not salty about it if you can't tell.
No, sure.
I wish LSU would do that too, Adam. I would love an FCS opponent at the beginning of the season, but a girl can only wish for so much. A lot of clunkers on the schedule this week, but as we just named a bunch of games last week that we thought were going to be clunkers. We still love it. We still love the sport, and we're going to drink it all up anyways. But that is going to do it for us today on the Tuesday night edition of the College Football Power Hour. He is Adam Breneman. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam Breneman81. That's Jason Fitz. You can find him on Twitter at Jason Fitz, and I am at Caroline Fenton 1. Appreciate you for stopping by the podcast. We are here during the week and after every single game on Saturday night. So you can like the podcast, subscribe, review, tell a friend, all of that great stuff. You can find us on your preferred podcast platform and the Yahoo Sports YouTube page. We are right back here Saturday night, early Sunday morning, reacting to all of the action in week 3. We're out.